Ամերիկացի երիտասարդ կինոռեժիսոր բեմադրիչ Braden King-ը ֆիլմ է նկարահանել Հայաստանում, այստեղ Here վերնագրով, որը վերջերս ցուցադրվեց Նյու Յորքում։ Այժմ ուզում եմ սիրով ձեզ ներկայացնել մեր արած հարցազրույցը այս երիտասարդ կինոռեժիսորի Braden King-ի հետ։
The guest of our program today is Braden King, director and co-writer of the film Here. The film was entirely shot in Armenia, and it evolves around Armenian subject. So this is fascinating because, for simple reason, because we don't really get to see that many films on this level being shot and produced in Armenia. So I want to begin with an obvious question, is why Armenia?
Sure. My path to Armenia was kind of a long and wandering one, but it started with a conversation that I had with an Armenian avant-garde filmmaker named Garine Tarosian, who used to be based in Toronto but now lives in Paris. And very early on in the process, when I was telling her, we were having a conversation about this kind of vague idea I had for a film about a map maker, she was the one who really first suggested to me that I consider shooting the film in Armenia. And at first, I didn't really, it sort of took a while. I would see a picture in the back of the newspaper, or I started looking at landscapes on the internet, or learning about different Armenian filmmakers, and over time it really kind of grew into an obsession for me, and somewhere that I felt I really had to set this story.
In essence, we have a story of someone who's making maps and goes to Armenia and meets a woman. And we are watching what?
Well, the film really tells the story of an American map maker who's played by Ben Foster, the actor Ben Foster, and who's traveling and working in Armenia. And along the way on his journey at a rural hotel near Astrak, by the way, he meets an Armenian art photographer who's originally from the country but who has lived most of her life outside and has been quite successful in France. And these two characters, these kind of two lone characters, very impulsively decide to travel together. And it's, it's a romance, but it's a struggle at times. And kind of, I think, by traveling together through the country and culture in this way, they kind of see parts of themselves that they wouldn't have discovered otherwise, and sort of, complete each other in a certain way, and sort of travel in a way that would have been impossible if either of them had been alone. And so the film really tells the story of this brief but affecting romance between these two characters, sort of set against the backdrop of the incredible landscape and scenery and culture in Armenia.
Have you been in Armenia before this film? Or before you started to scouting locations and so forth? How familiar were with the country?
I was, almost completely unfamiliar with the country before I started the project. I mean, when I was a very small child, I did live, I'm not Armenian, I don't have any connections to Armenia besides this film.
That's what makes this interview fascinating.
I did live in Glendale when I was young, so maybe I got hit with a Horvat stick or something, I don't know, something happened. But no, it was really like, as I was saying earlier, kind of a growing obsession with this landscape and this history that I didn't know anything about. And I mean, look, thematically, this is a film that is, very much about kind of how we find our place in the world, how we orient ourselves. And and when you combine that with a film about a map maker and a photographer that are kind of trying to make sense of their universe and their own places in the world, you're hard pressed, I think, to find a place that's more appropriate than Armenia, given the culture, given the geographic history, given areas like Nagorno-Karabakh, which are sort of literally undefined places on the map, in our contemporary world. So it was a process of kind of, I compared a lot to archaeology almost more than architecture for me. I was kind of following the breadcrumbs, and my trips to Armenia and my experiences there and getting to know the country were all part of that archaeology.
What was your experience in terms of physically working there? Was it a welcoming environment? Was it easy to put together a film? Were people helpful? Just in a few words.
Generally speaking, people were incredibly welcoming, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for the project. There were some real challenges in terms of mounting a film on this scale within Armenia. Logistically, there's very little, film infrastructure. Although I will say that the, National Cinema Center was as helpful as they could be. There are no labs in the country, so we were shipping all of our film out to England to be processed. It was shot on film. I feel like we all experienced an amazing amount of potential. and the enthusiasm of the people that we worked with and the crews that we had in Armenia and the capability that we found there, the richness of the culture, the richness of the landscape. You know, from my point of view, there should be 1,000 films shot in Armenia. There's no reason why it couldn't be the next, you know, Romania or Bulgaria, which has seen so much film production, if the kind of business infrastructure can be sort of, what's the word, if we can take some of the friction out of that a little bit. On a different level, a different way of talking about it, I mean, shooting in Armenia was incredibly challenging just logistically. We did, you know, this was, in the truest sense, a road movie that started up in the Lori region and went all the way down to the Iranian border in Magri into Nagorno-Karabakh and back.
I felt the same level of kind of an emotional impact of seeing the country, of seeing the landscape, of seeing it's shown and cinematographed in such a beautiful way, which is so rare for us because we do have an ancient land. I want to talk a little bit about the story, not in terms of what is it about, but in terms of how it began. As we know, most directors or most artists try to find something personal, something that entices them, something that inspires them within the story. What made you, and it's a big decision, obviously, to be committed to a certain story because it's years and years of your life being invested in it. What triggered you to be involved, and what made you decide on this particular film?
I think that whenever you're making something like this, and certainly something that takes as many years as this took to make, you know, and it's a sort of sincere journey on behalf of the maker, you're ultimately trying to work something out within yourself in some way. And I think, I remember a conversation I had with Ben Foster, the American lead. We were going over something in the script, and it was kind of a rehearsal, and I was explaining something that was happening between him and his romantic interest, you know, and they were sort of having an argument about something, and he kind of just laughed and looked up and he said, well, you know, you do realize that both of these characters are you, right? And so, you know, I think in some way it's about trying to work out different parts of myself and at the same time explore, you know, the different artistic endeavors, orientation endeavors, art endeavors that I'm interested in.
You have Ben Foster and Lubna Azaval in your film, two incredibly talented actors. I would be very curious to know, first, how did you approach them with the film? And then, what was the process of working with them in Armenia on this unique film? I understand she's not Armenian, correct? She's not Armenian, but she portrayed, from at least what we saw, it was a very naturalistic, obviously, performance. But how was it to work with the cast?
Lubna did an amazing job. She did an absolutely phenomenal job, and actually learned, there's a number of Armenian scenes in the film, and she learned all of her Armenian for the film phonetically, which from my perspective makes her performance even more amazing. In terms of how I found them, Lubna I had seen in a film called Paradise Now a number of years ago, and she kind of leapt off the screen for me. I mean, she really, I almost couldn't pay attention to the movie because she was sort of the embodiment of the spirit of this character that I've been writing. And I kind of went through a period of struggle. You know, I thought, oh, she couldn't possibly be Armenian because she's actually of Moroccan descent. She was raised in Belgium, but has played all different nationalities in her films. And I ended up bringing her. I met her through a workshop that I did at the Sundance Institute Directors Lab, and we worked together there, and that's what really made me feel like, you know, absolutely she can do this. Ben came on very late in the process through a fairly traditional casting method. He was someone I'd been interested in, and then I saw him in a great film that he did called The Messenger. It was directed by Oren Moverman. And I got about halfway through that film and called our casting director and said, get him the script right away. And actually, we were already in pre-production in Armenia before he was cast, but a few days later I got a call on my cell phone, and it was Ben calling saying, when can I come? He really embraced Armenia. I think Armenia was really a kind of wonderful inspiration and influence as we did travel through the country and create this story and these scenes.
On a more of a sort of an anecdotal level, you know, every film has a kind of a backstory. And certainly in Armenia, me born but there and raised there, I certainly know the people. These are fun-loving people. And if there is a story that jumps to your mind that you care to share with our audience.
How long do we have? There's a lot. You can make a whole film just on the stories of things that happened to us. I mean, there's There's a toasting scene in the film that I think is pretty true to life, that is based on some experiences that I and we all have had in Armenia. I do remember a few different stories. In one case, when we were scouting, we went on a couple of kind of scout trips before shooting the film. I mean, I'd been traveling there since 2004 and going back, but went with the whole crew. And as we went through the different villages and towns where we'd be shooting, we would usually try to meet with the local mayor or the local representative from the church and kind of let them know what was going on. And I do remember a beautiful lunch that we had down on the border in Magri with the mayor and all his friends, and it was primarily men, I think, as I recall. But by the end of that lunch, everyone was up and dancing and kind of best friends, and it went on well into the evening, including Ben, and we made new friends along the way.
And during the process of making the film, did you have an opportunity to work on a professional side with a crew or cast or actors in Armenia of Armenian descent from the Republic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, outside of our two leads, Lubna and Ben, all of the actors in the film were cast locally, primarily out of Yerevan, but some came from other cities as we moved around. And there's actually a number of real people in the film, a woman at a market or a mechanic in Karabakh. And, we went, our Armenian casting director, who's actually an American Armenian named Sean Petrosian, who works here in New York, came over and helped us to cast those roles. And we went to all the different theaters in Yerevan and saw hundreds of actors to play the supporting roles, and ended up working with some very prominent, local actors in Armenia. And I can't say enough about the skill and enthusiasm that they brought to the project. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there was absolutely no difference in level between them and the outsiders, and if anything, they're just as strong and have just as much to contribute. Narek Narsissian is an Armenian actor who played Gatherine's brother in the film, and he has since had some opportunities in Germany. He went to the Binger Film Lab there this past year, and it's very exciting to me to see some of these people continue to work both inside and outside the country. The same thing is true of the Armenian crew. I just can't say enough about their enthusiasm and the gifts that they brought to the film and how skilled everybody was.